She looked like someone the world would overlook without a second thought. A woman in simple clothes, moving through her day with the quiet focus of a mother whose biggest concerns were getting home on time and keeping her child calm. Her son walked beside her, small fingers wrapped around hers, his steps uneven as he tried to match her pace. To anyone watching, she was ordinary. No sharp edges, no visible strength, no hint of danger. Just a mother doing what mothers everywhere do, shielding her child from the chaos of the world by sheer presence alone. Her posture was relaxed, almost soft. She didn't scan crowds in an obvious way, didn't puff her chest or carry herself like someone trained for conflict. If anything, she blended in. That was the point. Years earlier, she had learned that the most powerful people in any room are rarely the loudest. Strength, when real, doesn't announce itself. It waits. Her son tugged at her hand, distracted by something small and unimportant, and she smiled down at him. That smile wasn't forced. It was practiced, yes, but not fake. It was the same smile she had learned to wear long ago, the one that said everything was fine even when it wasn't. A smile that kept children calm in places where fear could spread fast. To him, she was simply Mom. Not a warrior, not a survivor, just safety. Inside, though, she was always counting. Distance, movement. Exits, old habits never truly leave you. They just go quiet. She had promised herself that chapter of her life was over. No more missions, no more classified briefings, no more nights where survival depended on instinct and speed. She had traded all of that for bedtime stories and packed lunches, for scraped knees and school mornings. And she didn't regret it, not for a second. That was what made her seem so vulnerable. She had chosen peace, and peace changes how people see you. It softens the edges others expect to be sharp. To the wrong kind of person, that softness looks like weakness. She felt it before anything happened, the shift in the air, the subtle pressure that told her attention had turned toward them. Her grip on her son's hand tightened slightly, not enough for him to notice, just enough for her to feel grounded. She adjusted her position without thinking, placing herself half a step in front of him. It looked casual, protective but ordinary, the way any mother might move. In that moment, she was exactly what she appeared to be, a woman with everything to lose and nothing to prove. She wasn't thinking about rank or training or the past she kept buried. Her only priority was the small life beside her and the unspoken promise she had made the day he was born, that no matter what followed her out of her past, it would go through her first. To the world, she was an easy target. To her son, she was home. The moment they stepped closer, the atmosphere changed. What had been an ordinary stretch of time suddenly felt smaller, tighter, like the air itself was being squeezed. Their voices were loud enough to draw attention, but not loud enough to invite help. That was intentional. People tend to look away when trouble feels personal, but not public enough. They counted on that instinct. One of them laughed first. It wasn't humor. It was testing the ground, seeing how much space he could take. Another moved to the side, cutting off her path without touching her. A simple move, almost casual, but calculated. She stopped walking. Her son did too, confusion flickering across his face as he looked up at her. She felt his fingers tense in her hand. The words came next, sharp, dismissive, cruel in the way only people with power, or the illusion of it, can be. They spoke to her like she was an inconvenience, something in the way, like she should apologize just for existing in front of them. She didn't respond. Silence often irritates bullies more than resistance. It forces them to escalate. They did. One stepped closer, close enough that she could smell alcohol on his breath. Another leaned down slightly, angling his body so her son could see his face. That was the moment the line was crossed. The insults shifted. They weren't just for her anymore. They were meant to frighten the child, to establish dominance, to turn fear into entertainment. Her son shrank back, pressing into her leg. His breathing changed shorter, faster. She felt it through him, like a current running straight into her chest. She lowered her hand just enough to rest it on his shoulder, grounding him, steadying him. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm. Too calm. She asked them to step away. They laughed again to them. This was the part of the story where the woman breaks, where she pleads, cries, or freezes, where the child's fear becomes leverage. They had done this before. Different faces, same pattern. They mistook restraint for weakness and composure for surrender. One of them reached out, not to grab but to threaten, a gesture meant to say, "I can if I want to." That was when her expression changed. Not dramatically, not in a way that would alarm anyone watching from a distance, just a subtle shift in the eyes, a tightening that erased softness without raising her voice. Her son felt it before he understood it. The calm didn't disappear. It deepened. She guided him gently behind her, placing her body fully between him and them. It was instinctive, precise, practiced. To an observer, it looked like a scared mother protecting her child. To anyone who knew what to look for, it was positioning. The men didn't notice. They were too focused on the fact that the situation had gone further than expected, that they had crossed from harassment into something darker, something harder to walk away from. The crowd still wasn't intervening. The silence around them grew heavy. They had wanted control. Instead, they had triggered something old, disciplined, and utterly unafraid. And they still thought she was just a mother. Her son didn't understand the words being thrown around, but he understood tone. Children always do. He felt the sharpness in the voices, the way the space around them no longer felt safe. His grip on her leg tightened, small fingers clutching fabric like it was the only solid thing left in a suddenly shifting world. He tilted his head up to look at her, searching her face for answers she hadn't spoken yet. Fear shows itself differently in children. It isn't prideful or controlled. It's raw, immediate, honest. His eyes were wide, not with tears yet, but with questions. Why are they angry? Why aren't we leaving? Why is everyone watching but no one helping? He pressed his forehead briefly against her side, the way he did when he was overwhelmed, and that simple gesture landed heavier than any threat the men could make. Everything narrowed for her in that instant, not into panic, but into focus. The world reduced itself to two things: her son's breathing and the distance between him and danger. She adjusted her stance without thinking, shifting her weight, turning slightly so her body blocked his view of the men. She didn't want him memorizing their faces. She didn't want this moment following him into his sleep later. She spoke to him quietly, words meant only for him, simple, reassuring, the same tone she used during thunderstorms or nightmares. Her hand rested firmly on his back, slow and steady, matching his breathing until it began to calm. That touch was a promise. I'm here, you're safe, I've got you. The men mistook that softness for distraction. They thought her attention had shifted inward, that fear for her child had weakened her. In reality, the opposite was happening. The presence of her son wasn't a vulnerability, it was an anchor. It sharpened her awareness, locked her instincts into place. She wasn't thinking about herself at all anymore. Her son peeked around her for a second, curiosity fighting fear, and she subtly guided him back again, positioning him where he could see her face but not theirs. He watched her closely now. Children learn courage by borrowing it from adults. Every breath she kept steady, every movement she made with purpose, was teaching him something without words. He didn't know about the years she'd spent learning how to stay calm when everything screamed to react. He didn't know about the drills designed to break people down and rebuild them under pressure. What he knew was that his mother wasn't afraid. and that mattered more than any explanation. The crowd, the noise, the men in front of them, all of it faded slightly for him as he focused on her. The fear didn't vanish, but it stopped growing. He trusted her completely. That trust was absolute, fragile, and priceless. For her, that trust was sacred. Whatever happened next, whatever lines were about to be crossed, she knew one thing with certainty. This moment would not become a memory of helplessness for him. He would remember her standing firm. He would remember calm in the middle of chaos. He would remember that when the world turned threatening, his mother did not. And that was something worth protecting at any cost. The shift didn't announce itself with words. There was no dramatic confession, no shouted warning, no moment where she declared who she was or what she could do. That kind of reveal belonged to movies, not to real life. Instead, it surfaced in fragments, small, undeniable details that didn't belong to an ordinary woman backed into a corner. Her posture changed first. The slight curve in her shoulders straightened, not stiffly, but efficiently, like a system clicking into alignment. Her breathing slowed even further, deep and controlled, the kind learned under pressure where panic is a liability. One of the men noticed it and hesitated, his confidence stuttering just enough to be visible. He didn't know why, only that something about her no longer fit the role he'd assigned her. When one of them moved again, testing her space, she reacted not aggressively, but decisively. She shifted half a step, placing herself at an angle that blocked him without touching him. It was subtle, almost polite, yet it denied him exactly what he wanted: proximity. Her eyes met his for the first time, fully and directly. There was no fear there, no anger either, just assessment. That look did more damage than any threat could have. People who rely on intimidation expect a certain response: flinching, defensiveness, emotion. What unsettled him was the absence of all three. Her gaze wasn't pleading or defiant. It was professional, as if she were cataloging risks, weighing outcomes, already several steps ahead. Someone in the growing crowd murmured something under their breath. Another person pulled out a phone. The attention was shifting, and with it, the balance of power. One of the men scoffed, trying to reclaim control, but his voice cracked slightly as he did. He took a step back without realizing it. It was only then that a detail surfaced, something small, something easy to miss. A faint mark near her wrist when her sleeve shifted, not jewelry, not decoration, a scar, clean, old. Purposeful, the kind that comes from training accidents or operations that never make the news. Another scar at her collarbone, barely visible. Another story written into skin. The realization didn't hit all at once. It crept in, uncomfortable and unwelcome. This woman wasn't reacting like a victim because she had never been one. Whatever her past was, it had shaped her in ways they didn't understand and couldn't control. She spoke again, her voice low and steady, no longer asking. It wasn't a threat, it was instruction. The kind given by someone used to being obeyed, used to situations where hesitation costs lives. One of the men finally asked the wrong question: "Who do you think you are?" She didn't answer directly. She didn't need to. The answer was in the way she stood her ground without raising her voice, in the way her attention never left their hands, in the way she kept her son perfectly positioned behind her without ever looking back. They hadn't discovered her title yet. They didn't need to hear the words Navy SEAL spoken aloud to understand the truth settling in front of them. They had mistaken quiet for weakness. They had mistaken restraint for fear. And now, far too late, they were beginning to realize they had chosen the wrong woman and the wrong moment to test. What followed was not chaos, and it was not revenge in the way people imagine it. There was no loss of control, no wild anger spilling out. Everything she did carried the calm precision of someone who understood consequences and chose them carefully. The men expected an explosion, screaming, striking, panic. What they got instead was discipline. She gave them one last chance to step away. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a clear boundary stated once. It was the kind of warning that exists not for the listener, but for the person giving it. A final confirmation that every reasonable option had been offered. When they ignored it, the responsibility for what came next shifted entirely onto them. The first move ended the situation faster than anyone watching could process. It wasn't flashy or cruel, it was efficient. A redirection of momentum, a loss of balance, a sudden understanding that they were no longer in control of their own bodies. One man found himself on the ground, stunned more by how quickly it happened than by the fall itself. Another froze, unsure whether to advance or retreat, his confidence collapsing under the weight of surprise. She never turned her back, never raised her voice, never let her attention drift from her son. He remained exactly where she had placed him, safe, shielded, watching her face instead of the conflict. That mattered more to her than anything else. This was not about humiliation or punishment. It was about stopping a threat and ending it cleanly. The crowd finally moved. Someone shouted. Someone else called for authorities. The energy shifted from intimidation to accountability. The men, now disarmed of both power and narrative, tried to speak over one another, their earlier bravado replaced by excuses and outrage. It didn't work. Control had left them, and it wasn't coming back. When uniformed officers arrived, she stepped back without resistance, hands visible, posture neutral. She explained exactly what had happened clearly, calmly, without embellishment. Witnesses filled in the rest. The story no longer belonged to the attackers, and that frustrated them more than anything she had done physically. Only then did someone recognize her training, a detail in the way she spoke, the way she stood, the way she responded to authority without submission or challenge. Questions were asked quietly. Answers were given just as quietly. There was no announcement, no spectacle, just understanding. When it was over, truly over, she knelt in front of her son, met his eyes, smiled softly. She asked if he was okay. He nodded, still processing, but calm. He hadn't seen fear win. He hadn't seen helplessness. He had seen boundaries enforced without cruelty. As they walked away together, the world felt ordinary again. That was the point. Justice, when done right, doesn't linger like violence does. It restores balance and then steps aside. She didn't leave behind a legend or a warning. She left behind a lesson, quiet, firm, and unforgettable.